In the story of Jesus told in the Gospels, we find this ongoing theme where the various kinds of powers and authorities around Jesus don't quite know what to do with him. They don't quite know how to make sense of him because he doesn't really fit their categories. The religious leaders can't accept the idea that Jesus could be the Messiah because he doesn't fit their preconceived notions of what a Messiah is supposed to be. He doesn't really seem like a good, respectable religious teacher because he doesn't seem to fit their expectations of how to keep the rules and keep yourself untainted from sin and sinners. The political leaders don't know how to make sense of Jesus because they hear people call him Messiah or King, and he doesn't look like a king. And yet everybody has this desire to fit Jesus into their categories, into their boxes. So everybody gets upset with Jesus. The religious leaders because he doesn't fit their expectations. The political leaders because they deem anything that sounds like a Messiah or a king must be a violent threat. And they need to get rid of those threats. So by the end of the Gospels stories, you end up with both religious leaders and political leaders all mad at Jesus, all converging against Jesus for different reasons, but all of them see him as a threat because he doesn't fit their preconceived categories. Something happens similarly in the story of Jesus' followers that we call the book of Acts. And in a way, it's really kind of beautiful that Luke, our storyteller, wants us to see the same way Jesus himself didn't fit anybody's expectations or categories. The followers of Jesus also didn't quite fit people's expectations and therefore found themselves as holy troublemakers. This last session in our study in the book of Acts, we continued a little bit more slowly, but we continued through in chapter 17 and 18. And there's this scene as Paul is in the city of Corinth. And some of the religious leaders from the background of Judaism are upset with Paul because as he's preaching, the message he brings sounds contrary to their faith, right? Their belief in Christianity at this point is still figuring out, like, what are we? Are we a branch within Judaism? Are we something new? And as Paul kept announcing that God's way of saving the world, God's Messiah, turned out not to be the conquering king or religious lawgiver many were expecting, but his way of saving the world looked like a cross, like dying on a cross and rising. That upsets the religious leaders who say that's not what we were expecting. And so they bring Paul on charges in front of the Roman proconsul there. And they say, well, this guy's teaching things that are contrary to the law, right? The religious authorities are not so much interested in violating Roman law, but they're looking for charges that will stick, right? And the Roman leader says, well, look, you guys are just quibbling over words, right? Messiah, king, who cares about these things? If this were something really important, I would care. It's this reminder that the Romans are really only interested in order, not really in justice, and what will help keep them in power. And yet there will be times, we've seen them already so far, when the accusation is that these Christians are subverting the rule of the empire, when these Christians are announcing a different kind of king and teaching us to go contrary to the decrees of Caesar. Now we've got ourselves a threat. So there's this scene here where after the Roman proconsul Gallio says, I don't want to mess in this. This is just a matter of words between you and other religious parties. I'm not going to get involved in your issue. He dismisses them all, and the angry mob that had first gotten all swept up in bringing Paul up on charges now turns on the synagogue leader, a guy by the name of Sosthenes, and they beat him. And the Romans are watching this happen. It's again a reminder. The Romans don't come out as virtuous or excellent in the book of Acts, and the religious leaders also sometimes come off as jealous or petty or willing to resort to violence to get their ways, and Christians are supposed to be different from both of them. The followers of Jesus stand out, not only because of what we say about Jesus, but because in the midst of it, we aren't the ones joining in the mob looking to beat anybody up. We aren't looking to become the violent threat that Rome thinks, that our Jesus isn't meant to be a new emperor who's going to build a new empire that Rome needs to be afraid of in the same way. But Christianity very much is subversive, you could say. In a sense, he's not wrong. The emperor isn't wrong to say Christians are a little bit suspicious. It's that we're wrong, not in we're a threat, not in the way he expects. Right? Christianity becomes this message that subverts the whole way empire operates. This whole assumption that there's got to be this top-down, dominating sort of a way of seeing the world, that we plunder from the people around us, we take over, and that we can only be powerful if we're on top of somebody else. Christianity really does subvert that, really does turn it upside down. So in a sense, the empire is right when it gets a little bit nervous around these Christians, but not because the Christians are looking to start a mob or an insurrection, but because the very message of Jesus announcing God's kingdom blows apart the whole logic, the underpinnings of how empires work. Everybody has a hard time making sense of who these followers of Jesus are because they don't fit the categories that people bring to try and make sense of us. I wonder if that would be something helpful for us to hold on to as well, for us to go out into the world that is so quick to categorize us in terms of blue state, red state, this political party, that political party. Are you rural? Are you urban? Are you conservative? Are you progressive? And to say we're followers of Jesus, and that's going to make us look weird all around. It's going to make us stand out all around. And the message of Jesus is always still subversive of all the empires of the day, past, present, and future, and blows apart the expectations of respectable religion as well. Everybody should be a little bit nervous around the followers of Jesus because at our best, we are blessedly weird. When we forget that and just sort of like blend in and go with the flow, we end up losing the power of our witness. So join us this coming Thursday as we continue picking up in the story of the book of Acts about what happens as Paul heads on to another city in modern-day Turkey and Asia Minor called Ephesus, and we'll continue on this Thursday at 1 o'clock. If you can't join us in person, catch up with these video summaries along the way, and be blessedly weird.